Well, there you are, riding along the road, enjoying your cycling day, and then you hear that noise, that dreaded hiss, and you've got a puncture. So you have to pull over, and your tyre's dead flat, and then you have to get all your gear out, and you've got to repair it. And once it's repaired, then you need to inflate your tyre. Now, there's a number of different types of apparatuses you can use to do that, so we're going to discuss those after we roll this intro. Well, one of the most common devices to use is something like this, which is called a mini pump or a frame pump. And the reason why it's called a frame pump is because it normally comes with some sort of adapter you fit on, and it can be mounted underneath your drink bottle, so it's nice and neat there, and it's ready to be used anytime that you actually have a flat. So you don't need to remember to carry it or put it into your jersey pocket or into your backpack or whatever it is you're traveling with. So that's one of the great advantages with these devices. The problem is with this cute little thing that we like to use to pump our tyres up, it has a number of disadvantages, and there's three that I've come across with these type of devices. Now, the first one is, which you've all would have experienced if you've had one of these devices, is that this little tube here doesn't really put a lot of air into the tyre, and it struggles once you start to get it to high PSI, usually above 50 or 60 PSI. It becomes quite difficult. You press, and it goes, and then only a little bit of air goes in. And it usually takes, 100 pumps or more to get your tyre up to your normal road pressure, maybe of 70 or 80 PSI. Some may run lower, some may run higher. But if it's higher, these things, once you get to about 70 or 80, they really become pretty useless. So they do have disadvantages, and you may actually have to ride home with a tyre that's not inflated as you normally would, and it'll feel a bit squishy and not nice to ride on. But they do get you home, so they are a good little device. The other disadvantage that I've seen with these, which is more of a design disadvantage, now this one comes with a little extension that actually fits into the top here and hides away, and on one end it's got a Schroeder and on the other end it has a Presto. So that's a handy little device. And why I only buy ones that have a tube is because when you're pumping them, you get to those really high PSI, this part moves. So that little flexible hose takes up that movement. If you've got one of these that actually clips straight on to the Presto valve, what happens is once you start to get to those really hard pressures, you're starting to get a bit fatigued, you move it and it comes off, and then you release some of the air that you've just put into your tyre. So you go 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So I recommend the ones that come with some sort of little hose or device that can take up any movement whilst you're pumping. Then there's the trusty CO2 container. Now these little things are quite handy. You can actually buy devices as well that fit under your drink bottle where these things can fit on, pretty much like the mini pumps, and normally you can fit 2 of these on screw, one in the other, so they're ready to be used. And then you use like a little device like this, which is like a dispenser device, and you screw this into the end, and when you press on it, it actually releases the valve in here because this has been punctured, and then it'll inflate your tyre. And it inflates the tyres incredibly quickly, less than a second. It's amazing, and to like 90 or 100 PSI. So pressure-wise, these things are great. The disadvantage with them is they're pretty much a 1 or 2 time use. So if something happens, or the repair that you've done on your tube, or the cut or something doesn't work, or you don't seat this properly on the Presto valve and you lose the pressure, then this thing gets used up and you can't reinflate your tyre. But handy little device. So this has some significant disadvantages. I don't particularly like to recommend these. I don't use them because I found that because I use sealant to seal the punctures in a lot of cases, I find that these things are too aggressive to the sealant, and what happens is where it's sealed, it tends to put too much force on them too quickly, and it re-establishes the puncture. So if you're using sealant or something like that, or a tubeless tyre, and it's not quite holding pressure and it's sort of semi-sealing, I wouldn't recommend using these. Just use a hand pump. Now there is a third option, and this is what I actually carry around with me most of the time, and it's one of these. and I don't know what you call this. It's sort of like a in between the mini pump and a floor pump. It has a little foot stop, and the lever here unscrews. It's got a little valve device on the side of it, and these things are really great because if you want to inflate your tire at all, or you're traveling overseas and you want to get your tire up to like 90-100 psi, and you also want to control the pressure that goes into your tire because you're using sealant, this thing, it meets all those requirements. The only disadvantage with it is, as you can see, it's pretty big, and if you're carrying a backpack, it fits in almost every backpack very easily. But if you want to carry it in your jersey pocket, it's a bit big. There is actually a frame mount that comes with it, so you can mount it on your frame. So if you're just doing backpacking, this would be the ideal pump. But generally, it looks pretty ugly on a road bike, and it's quite big. So that's its biggest disadvantage. The convenience is a disadvantage with this one. But I do recommend this for if you can carry one of these. 100% recommend this pump. So in conclusion, it comes down to the amount of risk you're prepared to take when you go for a ride compared to the convenience of if you have a flat and how you're going to fix it. Now, if you always carry a tube, you're going to put a new tube in, a CO2 container with the adapter, you could probably get away with that, especially if you carry a couple of them. As I said, I don't really recommend them, but people like to use them, and if you get your tube in and you're very good at getting your tube in, you can whack these things on, and especially in a group ride, you can get your tyre pumped up very, very quickly and you're on your way. Now, the mini pump is also a good alternative, but apart from being convenient, it's a bit of a compromise in every situation, and I don't particularly like them. If you are a really light rider, maybe they suit you. So what I recommend, if you have something like a backpack, right, or somewhere where you can fit the bigger pump conveniently, I recommend the bigger pump, because when it comes to inflating your tire, even if for some reason your tire's gone down slowly, or you forgot to pump it up when you left home, this pump is like a normal pump. You can pump it, stop your bike and get off it. You can pump your tire back up to 90-100 psi, whatever. Fine, because that's the sort of pump it is, and it's great for when you're traveling as well. Now, it all comes down to your application. So if you're probably just going out for a short ride, you may not even take anything. So it depends on the amount of risk you're going to take, how far you're riding, how far you're going to be away from the point where you need to get back to or where you're going to, depending on what sort of equipment you will take. Now, guys, you let me know, because there's a lot of solutions to this, to a puncture, because there's some people out there, I don't know if you're one of them, who actually doesn't even carry any tubes at all, and they rely on the people in the group rides to supply them with a tube and a little CO2 container, and they take basically nothing. So I don't know if you're going to admit to that down in the comments, but let us know what you take and what you use, and how you fix your puncture on the side of the road, and how you re-inflate your tyres, and why it is that you use that piece of equipment. Well, guys, that's where I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to catch you next vid. Cheers.